Hi, how's it going? This is what we're working on today. We will be doing mining. So you'll see the mine that you've got currently selected that you're currently mining. There will be UI showing in the world for which mine you're at, and there will be an icon for the resource that you're mining. You'll have this fill bar for how quickly you're getting those resources, and it'll be Factorio-like in that if you leave the mine or if you stop mining it, then you lose your progress. Okay, and then obviously all this stuff plugs into your inventory. Okay, so it makes one call to the inventory, and that's it. All right, this should be plug and play. Everything here is free. All the assets are free, and I will have links to the scripts in the description. Alright, so we're in Unity 2019.3, but I'm sure you can do this in 2020 or any other version because we're not using any crazy namespaces or any super crazy technology that isn't available in Unity 5.6 or anything like that. Okay, so we're going to create a mining folder. I've already got a scripts folder and I created a mining folder. We're going to create 3 scripts here. We're going to create 3 C# scripts. I'm going to create a miner. I will create the Mineable, which is our mine. Okay, this is where we're going to get our resources from. Okay, so Mineable, even if that's spelled incorrectly, and we will have a UI for this. So let's have a controller for that UI. So we'll call this MiningUI. So let's go ahead and pop into the miner. We're actually going to take a look at that. Let me get that on the screen here. So we'll go ahead and remove all those. We need to bring in our simple inventory. So if you don't have an inventory, you can download mine at GitHub, and I'll have links to that in the description. So we will need an inventory because without it we won't be able to put items, whatever resources we're mining, we won't be able to put those into the inventory without the inventory. So get a reference to your inventory. This should work even though even if you have a different inventory than mine. Your inventory should have some kind of method on it that says add to or add item to the inventory, whatever. Alright, so we'll invoke that method whenever we mine something. Alright, on this we're going to need a private method. We'll call this, actually it needs to be public because we're going to do this from our input controller. So we'll call this public void mine. So whenever we enter a resource, we will mine it. Okay, we will have 2 private methods called private void enter mine and private void exit mine. Alrighty. To go into those mines, so in order that we invoke those methods, we're going to go ahead and use Unity callbacks, and we're going to use on trigger enter. Okay, so on trigger enter and on trigger exit when we leave the mine. So the problem with this is if we have like overlapping resources, then we won't know exactly which resource we're going into. I'll let you guys deal with that, but this should work for a simple mining method and for prototyping. Okay, so we're going to say if the other collider, if the collider other matches the mines tag, so we're going to put a tag on our mines, then we will enter the mine. Okay, so let's go ahead and write that. Alright, so what do we need to do here? We need to go ahead and set ourselves a mine. And I'm going to serialize this, even though we don't want to serialize it because we're not dropping it in the inspector. This will make it easier to debug without having to turn on Unity debugging, switching over from the inspector to the debug inspector. So let's go ahead and bring in our Mineable. We'll call this our current mine. How did I spell Mineable? Oh no, I capitalized the I. Oops. Well, that's fine. so this is our mine. We'll call it current mine. Now we will set this in our, we'll set it in onTriggerEnter. Alright, so if you've never seen this before, the try_get component, you pass an empty class, an empty pointer, right? And if it finds the component on this other collider, okay, so if it finds it on the list of components on that object, then it'll put that component onto M, right, and then pass M into enter mine, all right, and then we can set current mine as this mineable M. Okay. Now, when we leave, we want to do the same thing. Anytime that we leave any mine, and this isn't specific for the mine that maybe, like I said before, if we have overlapping resources, overlapping mines, then this will be a problem. However, if you have your resources well spaced out and stuff like that, then it won't be such a problem. Whenever we exit the mine, we're just going to set our current mine as null. We might also fire off an event. So we're going to use this. We're going to use brackets here just in case we want to add more stuff here. Let's go ahead and fix our Mineable. I'm going to change the name here. Make sure that that's a lowercase I. All right. Now, I'm not sure that we're going to need these, so I'm going to go ahead and delete them. We need two public methods. We already have this on our miner, but we also want it on the mine itself. So we'll have enter mine, and we're going to pass in our miner, right? And we'll have exit mine to do the same thing, where we nullify the miner. Oops. So make a reference to your miner. And when the miner gets into the mine, then we will set the current miner as M. Okay, and we're calling this from the miner. So let's go ahead and go to our enter and exit mine and call that. So yeah, let's go ahead and say current mine, enter mine, and pass it this. Same thing with current mine. So I'm going to do this before, and sometimes we have issues with this. So we'll check if it's not null, and we'll say current mine. If it's not null, exit mine. Okay. We'll go ahead and put two events here for when we enter and exit. So we'll use public delegate void on enter mine, right? And we won't pass any parameters for that. Okay, and we'll have a public delegate void on exit mine.
And then we will create some events. Enter mine.
Alright, so when we enter the mine and exit the mine, we're going to go ahead and call these at the end of the function. And then we will have stuff listen to this. For example, the UI will listen to this. Oops, that's not what I wanted. We're going to say if it's not null, if there's something listening to it, then we'll invoke it. Same thing on exit mine. Okay. Actually, I think we will want to pass the mine when we enter a mine. Okay. Okay. Now let's go back to that mine, and we're going to go ahead and say public void mine resource. Alright, so we need to have a resource to mine. Let's go ahead and make a serialized field private. And then now is where you need to have an item or a resource some kind of component, some kind of class that you have that we can put here, the item that the miner, the player, is going to receive. So I'm going to go ahead and call my simple inventory and get an item, and this is, I'm just going to call this a resource. Okay, we'll call that null for now. Let's say if resource isn't null, then we'll do our mining stuff. Okay, all right. Now we also want to say that we have a number of resources on this mine. So maybe it's a tree, you have 5 pieces of wood for each tree, for example. All right, so private int number of resources. We'll just default that to 5. Okay, if resource does not equal null, and let's go ahead and put in resources remaining, int resources remaining. Default that to 0, and then we'll go into start and make sure that every time we start the game, every time we enter play mode, we will set resources remaining to number of resources. Now we can make this a random number, so we could say max number of resources, min number of resources, and then do a random range here. So resources remaining, actually we'll do that right now, sorry. Max resources, min resources, and we could put this on a scriptable object, give your mine's stats, but I'm going to keep this as simple as I possibly can. Okay, so we'll have a minimum of 1. We'll say random range, so our resources remaining is a random range between min resources and max resources. So we'll have 1 to 5 of this item resource. Okay, so if the resource is not null and resources remaining is greater than 0, then we will mine it, and if not, well, we don't really have to do anything if not. Okay, actually, yes, we do. We want to say that it's empty, and we will set the game object to inactive. So let's actually create a method here called public delegate void on empty. Public on empty. On empty. We'll call that, we'll fire that once it's empty. Okay, that looks pretty good for now. Obviously, we don't have anything that tells the miner that it's going to receive resources, so we should put that onto our miner. So let's go ahead and rename this mining method. We're going to put this all into a region, public methods. And then we'll change the name of this to mine current. A little more specific, and we will add a method, a public method called receive resource, for when we finally do get that mined. Okay. So we're going to receive resource I, and if we have an inventory, right, if it's not null, we're going to add it to the inventory, and we'll just add 1 as by default. All right, so if we don't have the inventory, then we'll fire debug.log error. There's no inventory on player. Perfect. All right, now let's go into Unity in the inspector. Actually, we'll go into the inspector. We'll make sure that we have these scripts on our things. Okay, so I've got a player. I'm going to need a sphere collider. Okay, so I'll go ahead and show you guys me putting this sphere collider. Right. So remember, on that miner script, we have those Unity callbacks on trigger enters. So we're going to make sure that we put a sphere on him, and we're going to put on is trigger. Go ahead and move that sphere up, and we'll say that his radius, right? So whenever we touch a resource, anytime a mine enters that radius, okay, it's going to trigger that on trigger enter. All right, so I have these bushes and trees. These are my minables. Okay, so you can get wood or whatever from this. I'm going to go ahead and put my mineable script on this. I have the tag on it. I've already got the tag mine, and I put the mine tag onto the tree. I'm going to put the mineable on there. Uh-oh. Got a problem here. This didn't get renamed. Okay, so let's see if that doesn't create a huge error. Looks like it should be good. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that mineable script on there. Okay, and I have a wood item in here. I'm going to go ahead and put that on. All right. Now, nothing's going to happen yet because we don't have a reference to our miner in the input manager. Okay, so I'm going into my input manager, and I'm going to you can see that I've already had this before. All right, so I'm going to make sure that I have a reference to my miner on my input manager, and then whenever I click the mining key, all right, so I'm going to say my mining key is right click. Whenever I right click, holding it down, I'm going to mine current, okay, from my miner. Perfect. So save that. All right, now I've got a mover on here too, so whenever I click somewhere, he's going to move to that location, okay, using the Unity nav mesh system, the nav agent. Okay, now let's make sure that our mine will actually give our players something. All right, now mine current doesn't do anything, so we're going to say if current mine, then current mine dot mine resource. All right, so we'll call that mining resource on the mineable. All right, and then just for fun, we're going to say miner. Where's our miner? Current miner. Sorry. Receive resource, and we're just going to give him infinite resources. All right, so he's going to receive a ton of these of this resource. All right, so press play. He's going to come over to the tree. I've got my inventory open, so we'll see this happen. We should see it happen. Uh-oh, I don't have. This should be working. All right, now let's make sure we've got that serialized. So let's make sure that the guy is actually entering the mine. We didn't reference the miner, and we didn't even put the miner on the player, so that's our problem. Okay, let's put our miner onto the player. Oop. Let's reference our inventory, which is on our player, and we'll see this when we walk into that mine, when we collide with it, when our trigger enters it, we'll see that the current mine becomes that tree. Right, perfect. Right clicking, nothing is happening because I never put the miner onto the input manager. Now I'm right clicking, and like I said, we're getting just infinite of that resource. Okay, so that works. All right, so make sure that anything that you did in play mode, you repeat in scene mode, in scene view. Okay, let's check out what that. Right, so that null reference is to from the input manager to the miner. Okay, that's fixed. Okay, now we're going to go back into our mineable, and we're going to say that every time that, obviously, every time he receives one of these resources, we're going to subtract it from our remaining resources. Okay, so resources remaining minus minus. But we also want to do this only when a certain amount of time is expired. So it's not like you're just immediately getting everything out of this this resource, all right, this mine. Okay, so we're going to have a private float, and this is going to be the mining time. So the amount of time that it takes to receive resources from this object. Okay, and I'm going to create a public float mining time so that we can access that mining time from elsewhere. This is going to be important for our UI. Okay, so we're looking to have like a Factorio-like UI where it shows you a bar filling as we receive these resources, as we finish this mining time. Okay, so we'll also need to have a private countdown. Default that to 0, and we'll say as the countdown or the count up approaches the mining time. Okay, once we reach the mining time, then we will say that we received the resource. Okay, so let's do that. We can actually put this in at the very top, and we'll say if the resource is null, or if there's no resources remaining, then we'll just return from the method. Else, if countdown equals is greater than or is equal to the mining time, then we receive the resource. All right, and if we have the resource and the resource is remaining, then we'll add to the countdown. All right, so plus equals time.delta time times, well, we don't have a mining time yet, so, or a mining speed yet. Okay, now make sure that when the countdown is at its maximum or passes its threshold, all right, we're going to go ahead and reset it. So we'll set that countdown back to 0. Okay, now once we're at 0, okay, we're going to go ahead and put this at if resource remaining Alright, so once resources remaining equals 0, okay, so when we go from 1 to 0 in the same frame, this will deactivate the game object and it will call the onEmpty event. Now, we want also to have a mining speed for our miner. Alright, so that we have some kind of goal for your player where you can upgrade your player and say, okay, yeah, you mine faster if you do this and that, alright, or you find a technology and you mine faster. So let's go ahead and put that onto our miner. Alright, let's first make it serializable. You could do this again with scriptable objects where you have miner stats, but right now this is really simple and there's only one of them, so you don't have to like worry about a whole bunch of data floating around in your project. So we'll just say private float mining speed, and I'm going to say 2.0. So it'll take half a second in order to mine one resource. Okay, and we will have public access to that, so the mine will actually get this information. Okay, so let's go ahead and reference that. So the countdown plus equals time.delta time times miner dot mining speed. All right. So because the amount of time it takes to mine one resource here is 1 second, and our miner's speed is 2, it'll take half a second to do this. Okay. So we'll see that now. Right. So you're going to see that instead of just having these infinite resources, we'll get 1 to 5, and it'll take time to do it, unless I made a mistake. Uh-oh. Let's take a look at our player, make sure that we're on the tree. We are on the tree. The tree has a resource. Let's take a look at the resources remaining, countdown. Let's see if countdown is going up. I'm in debug mode here. Okay, so I'm clicking on that tree. I'm going to go back, make sure. Okay, we have the players there. We're right clicking, nothing's happening. Okay, so you can see here that the countdown's not increasing as it should be. Let's see why that's happening. Okay, so that's a huge mistake. This is this should be if resource equals null and or if resources remaining equals 0, then we return. So we never got to any of this code. Let's go ahead and go back in and see how this works when it's fixed. Right, so now there are not infinite resources, and obviously it takes time to get these pieces of wood. Okay, looks like I didn't enter this one. No, this prefab doesn't have the mine on it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add our mineable. Okay, it doesn't have the resource on it. Alright, so let's go ahead and put wood on the trees, and this actually has a mineable. We'll put berries on the bush. One more time, take a look at it in play mode. Nice, okay, so that one only had one. There we go. Alright, so it looks like things are working. I'm going to go back because I have to enter that trigger again. Alright, so things are working. Alright, now it would be nice for our player to know what their status is as far as being on a mine, what they're mining, and how quickly they're mining it. So we're gonna make that Factorio-like UI. Okay, so I'm creating a new game object on my main canvas. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and stretch it all over the screen. Alrighty, so put my thing at stretch, and let's go ahead and scene view 2D. Alright, so we'll see that it stretches. Okay, I'm going to call this the mining container. I'm going to add 3 images. Okay, one image is the sprite that we're going to use for our resource. Alright, so my items already have a sprite. Okay, so I've got a name, a description, and an icon on all of my items. Okay, so we'll use that, and we'll put it, just right in the middle there. Okay, let's move the anchors for that so it goes right into the middle of your screen and expands with the size of the screen. Okay, so say 0.47 to 0.453, 0.52. Okay, go ahead and go up to 4 and 11. Alright, we'll zero that out. Okie dokie. So let's rename that image. We'll call this the icon. No, we'll call it the resource image. Alrighty, and then under this we're going to put a bar. So first we'll have the background. Okay, and I'm going to put this down at the bottom. I'm going to stretch it across the screen, and I will have it go up to about just under the resource image. Okay, I'm going to pat it from the left and the right, and from the top and the bottom. It's a little thin and very wide, so I'm going to go 75, 100. So this is 100 pixels from the left side of the screen. Let's say 200. Alright, so it's 200 pixels from the left and the right side of the screen, and then it's 25 pixels from the top and the bottom of these anchors. Alright. Now, this is going to be the background image, so I'm just going to call this BG image, and then I'm going to child another image to it. Alright, and I'm going to stretch it and I'm going to zero it out. Okay, so it'll be right on top of that background image. Okay, now I'm going to pad it so that there's like a border with the background. Okay, and this is going to be the fill bar. And we need to add a source image. Okay, otherwise we can't change the type of image that this is. We can't make it into a fill. All right, so you see that I put the sprite in, and now we can change the image type. We're going to make it filled. We're going to make the fill method horizontal. All right, and now we can already see that when it's at 0, you don't see it, and if it's at 1, it goes all the way to the other side. All right, so that's where the fill origin starts at the left. If we had done it from the right, then you see that it goes from that way. All right, I prefer from the left. Okay, we'll leave it there at 0.65 so that we know that if it doesn't change, there's an error. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the background. I got these sprites from PNG Tree. Okay, those were free. And then on the resource image, we don't even have to put anything in there. However, it would help us to know what it'll look like if we do. Okay, so I'm just doing this as an example. Put my apple in there, and I'm going to preserve aspect. So that'll make it so that it remains in its native size. Okay, so it doesn't stretch, it doesn't skew. Skewed native, right? Okay, let's plug this in. All right, let's go back to our mining folder and open the MiningUI. We're going to reference, actually we're going to bring in the Unity Engine UI namespace. And we will need a reference to our miner. All right, we will need references to our images. Okay, in start, we need to reference our miner. Okay, we need to, actually in start, let's change this from start to a public void called initialize. Because we have these events, right? We have these on enter mine, on exit mine. We need to make sure that the player is initialized before the UI, okay, so that we can listen for those events. So that's why I'm doing it like this, all right? So I'm going to call my miner and say on enter mine plus equals, let's do this, private void update UI with the mine. Alright, we'll do something there, and then we'll have something for when we exit the mine. Okay, so on enter mine, we update the UI with our new mine. And when we exit the mine, we exit, and we're going to close our UI here. Okay, so whenever we exit a mine, or if it's empty, then we want to go ahead and just shut down. We want to turn off our UI. Okay, so let's turn off the resource image. Because the background image is the parent of the fill bar image, we don't have to turn off the fill bar. Obviously, this is all in a container, and we could turn off the container, but I don't want to put my MiningUI directly onto the canvas, okay, because sometimes I forget about it. So I'm going to put my MiningUI right here, and if we were to turn off this container, then we wouldn't, it would deactivate this behavior, okay, so that's why I'm not doing that. Alright, I did this before, and we're going to need to use update. It's going to work better if we use update. Okay, so in Factorio, there's this mechanism where if you leave a mine and you've partially mined it, you'll see that the bar, once you leave it, the bar goes back down. And that's kind of fun to see. So we're going to go ahead and try to copy that. so we're going to say void update. And if we have a mine, we're going to go ahead and have a mine. Alright. So if we don't have a mine, then we'll just return. And if we do have a mine, then we're going to update our UI. And actually, we're not going to use the mine, we're just going to use its countdown. Okay. So float, let's call it mining progress. So how close we are to getting that next resource. All right, we'll pass in the mines countdown. We need a public reference to the countdown. So that's, I didn't want mining time, I wanted the countdown. Alrighty, let's reference that. Okay, update UI has a problem. Right, so what we actually want to do when we enter mine is go ahead and say private void set mine. We'll pass in our Mineable, set our mine to M. Now, when our mining progress is 0, we want to turn off these objects, and when it's above 0, we want to turn them back on. All right. Now, this isn't efficient, but it'll work. All right. If you guys have a better suggestion, leave it in the comments, and I'll fix it on the GitHub for other people to use your fix, and I'll give you guys credit. Okay. Alright, so we have our resource image, and we're going to say game object set active. Whenever a mine progress is above 0, then it'll be active, and if not, then it'll be inactive. Okay, so we're calling this on every frame, which isn't efficient. That's the caveat here. Okay, we're doing the same thing with the background image. Okay, and then we're going to say our mining fill bar value, fill amount, equals mine progress. Okay, so let's just make sure that that works. Okay, so as it stands, it won't work. We're actually going to call this mining progress, because otherwise it would have just passed a straight up countdown. All right, so we need to divide countdown by mining time. So as the countdown goes up, closer to mining time, the progress goes up, obviously. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. Let's see if it works. Make sure that we put our MiningUI script onto the mining container.
Alrighty.
We'll take a reference of our miner, which is my player. Get our resource image, background image, and fill image. Okay. Alrighty, let's press play. Now this will start as it did before. Now when we enter a mine, uh-oh, didn't work. Let's see. Nope, not going to work. Okay, so let's take a look at what the problem is there. I'm going to go ahead and default those things to off. The problem is we didn't initialize our UI. Okay, so let's take a reference of our MiningUI.
Oops.
So now in the player we have a reference to the MiningUI, and we're going to go ahead and implement the start callback, and we'll say MiningUI.initialize. See if that works. So we'll still have this active when we start the game, but when we go to a mine, Oh, it's still not working. What's the problem? Miner 24. We didn't reference it. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's restart. Let's go back, put that in when we're not in play mode. Go to a mine. You just entered the mine. Aha. Now the image sprite never got set because I never set that in the code. However, our fill bar is working and that looks nice. So let's go ahead and fix the image problem. Go back into the MiningUI. And when we set the mine, we can actually set the image. And we'll just do that once. Alright. Okay. Let's see. Resource image sprite equals Mineable resource. We don't have it. Okay. So we need a public reference to our resource. So we'll invoke. We'll bring in that namespace. We'll create public access to our resource. And that's what holds the item icon. And we'll pass that in. Okay, so actually let's turn off the resource image on start. Alright. Press play and we'll see that this turns off. Okay, and then when we enter a mine, it'll set the icon. Cool. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's make sure that it works with our bush. Should see those apples come back, even though they're supposed to be berries. Perfect. Alright, that's good. Alrighty. Okay, we've got this problem where when we exit the mine, if we've partially mined, nothing happens. Alright. Now, I did a little bit of work here to figure out what happened, and what we need to do is obviously make sure that when we exit the mine, we nullify our current mine. Okay, so make sure that mine is null. Now, if we hadn't done that, we would have kept on updating the mining progress. Okay, so if mine is null, then we just return out of update. However, if we have the mine and there's mining progress, and that progress is above 0, then all this stuff is active. Now it's good that it was active, because if it hadn't been, then we would have not realized this error. I wouldn't have realized this error. Okay. Now, what we also want to do is make sure that we reduce the mining progress on our Mineable. But let's first test this out real quickly. So let's go ahead and go back into play mode. Alright, so we're just sorting out the UI here. Okay, so we're leaving. Alright, now it actually does turn off. Now, what we want to do is say if we leave, then this, if we stop mining, then this bar should go down. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into our Mineable and say in update. We're going to say that if the player is not currently mining, then we will reduce the countdown. All right. So whenever we're mining, we're increasing the countdown. Okay. And then if the countdown is greater than 0, let's say, and we're not mining, then we will reduce countdown. Okay, so let's just reduce it by time.delta time. Okay. Now, if we just left that as it is, even while we're mining, we would see that. So now instead of taking half a second, it'll take 1 second in order to mine a resource. Okay, and we'll take a look at that. Yeah, so it's a little bit slower. However, we do see that it reduces. But what we want to do is make sure that it's not reducing while we're mining. Okay, so we could put a bool in here, and I think that'll be the easiest way to do this. All right, so I'm going to put in a private bool. We'll call it being mined. We'll set that to false by default. Now we're going to say that if we are receiving input, then we're being mined, and if we're not receiving input, then we're not being mined. So at the end of update, we're going to say we're not receiving input anymore, and being mined is false. Now, if we are not being mined, and the countdown is greater than 0, we'll reduce the countdown. Now, I set the mining time to 5 just to see that this would work perfectly. If the mining time, if we were to say, for example, if we were to do this without the bool, and we had this just doing on, if we had that mining time of 5 seconds, and then we also had this countdown being reduced by delta time, I think it would take about 7.5 seconds to do this. So let's go ahead and go in here and just make sure that this is working right. Okay, so 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, let's just check it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe it's a little fast. Okay, but it looks about right. Now, if we go out of play mode and go ahead and remove that boolean, that being mined boolean, you're going to see that it takes a lot longer, about twice the amount of time. Okay, so let's test that real quick just to show you what would happen if we didn't have that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that this is doing exactly what we wanted it to do. Okay. Alright, so we'll leave that there. We added being mined into mining resource. So whenever we're receiving input from the input manager that says mine this, your current resource, then being mined is true. Otherwise, it's false. So, perfect. Okay, that looks good. Now we're almost done. However, we need to fix something with the miner. I enter a mine, right? So I'm on this mine. Okay, so I know I'm there. Now, if I right click anywhere on the screen, I'm mining this particular tree. Okay, so let's go ahead and give ourselves an indication of which Mineable we're actually at. All right, we're going to create a world canvas. So we're going to go UI canvas, and let's call it, world canvas, Mineable. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and change it from screen space overlay to world space. We'll change the size, so I'm going to go ahead and reset it, and I'm going to set it to about 2 width and a 2 height. 3 might be good. Okay, so we can see our canvas right here. It's in the ground, so I'm going to move it up above the ground, and I'm going to give it an image. It's just a regular UI image. It's going to be enormous. I'm going to stretch to the limits of the canvas, and then zero out all these parameters there. Now, this will need an offset, so I'm going to set it above the object that we're going to put it on. Okay, so still have that there, but we're going to offset it by about 3. All right, so it'll be 3 units above its object. Okay, so I got this sprite from PNG key. Okay, and I'm going to put that onto the world canvas there, onto the image. Okay, so you're going to take a look. When we enter mine, we're going to see this ring above the mine. Okay, we could even do it. Let's see, where was the canvas before? So let's put it at 0. Alright, so actually that looks pretty decent. Let's go ahead and move that down just slightly, and we'll kind of circle the mine that we're at. Okay, now we need to put this into our MiningUI. So let's go ahead and open that up, and we're going to create header, just so that we know what we're talking about. We will put in a private image. Actually, we don't even need access to that image. Okay, so we'll do a game object, and we'll just call this the world canvas. And this is going to be the object that goes to the mine. So whenever we set the mine, right, whenever we enter a mine, we're going to create, we're going to set the world canvas as active. We're going to place it at the position of our mine. We're going to make it face our camera. So we'll just use look at camera.main.transform. Okay, and then whenever we exit the mine, then we need to turn that off.
Alright, so we can do that. Let's go do it at the bottom.
Okay, world canvas.setActive false. Okay, save. Let's plug in our values. So go to our MiningUI and grab that canvas. Alright, now let's default it to inactive. Whoops. Okay, so we should see that pop up once we enter the trigger. Perfect. Now we'll go ahead and mine it. All right, and we have that problem where it's the world canvas stays there whenever the mine runs out of resources. So we'll fix that right now. If you remember, on the Mineable we have an event that says on empty. Okay, so this fires whenever we run out of resources. And if we listen to that in the miner, okay, so when we enter the mine, we're going to go and listen to the mine and say current mine on empty. We're going to exit the mine. All right, so when the mine is empty, we exit it, and then we have to unlisten that. Otherwise, we have memory leak. Okay, so when the mine is empty, we'll exit the mine. This exit mine calls an event that the MiningUI listens to, and whenever the player, the miner, exits the mine, we exit the mine here and turn off all the UI. So let's take a look at what that would look like. All right, and that'll automatically be fixed with those two lines that we just added. So let's go to our mine, exhaust it, and perfect. It's already fixed. So let's make sure now that we the last thing that we want to fix now is this fact that even if my cursor's not on the mine that I'm currently mining, okay, so we see my current mine is this one, I can just click wherever, and I'm still able to mine. Where what ideally you would do is, if the mouse is on the mine, then you would be able to do that. You would be able to mine it. Okay, so let's fix that now. Alright, so I fixed this up off screen, and I'll walk you through what I did. I put in this private bool cursor over current mine. So we're firing a ray from our screen point to the mouse position. And so that'll convert a screen position into a world position. Alright. We'll fire this sphere cast, and a sphere cast is different from the ray cast in that it fires a thicker line. All right, the line has a radius, okay, and the radius is 0.5 in this case. All right, we're firing out to 100 meters. All right, and we are sending out the hit struct, the raycast hit struct. Okay, we're going to go ahead and print the collider name, and then we're going to create memory for a Mineable. We will check if the hit collider has a Mineable on it, and if it does, we will return whether or not it is the same as, if that Mineable is the same as our current Mineable. All right, and if it is, it returns true, else it returns false. Okay, so if we have a current mine and our cursor's on that mine, then we will mine the resource. All right, Now let's take a look at what we need to do. Now, right now, my player is on the default layer. Okay, so you're going to see a problem here. If you use a player layer, this might not work. And I'll give you guys a solution for that. But first, let's see what happens here. Okay, and you guys can kind of try to figure it out. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go behind my Mineable here. Oops. All right, so I'm going behind my Mineable. All right, so we got the tree. All right, I can hit the tree from there. Now I'm going to go in front of the Mineable, and I'll let you guys figure out what it is that's causing the problem. And look at the console, right? So I'm hitting the player's sphere. If you remember, we have that sphere trigger all around the player. So that's what the raycast is hitting. And now if we just set this layer to ignore raycast, okay, then there's no problem. All right, so we could be standing right in front of our Mineable, and there's no problem. Now, if you have a player layer, which you could do, all right, so we go back to the player layer, all right, let's go ahead and create that just for the example. Okay, we'll put our player on the player layer. Peter Piper picked a pickled pepper. Okay, so he's on the player layer, and I can go ahead and create a new empty game object. I'll put it at 0, and I'll put it onto my player. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and transfer the sphere collider that he had. I'm going to go ahead and actually copy its components. I'll disable it for now. I'm going to put this into IgnoreRaycast, and I'm going to put a sphere collider on it. And I will set its component value. So we'll see that he still has that sphere on him. Okay. Let's just make sure that we've got the sphere on him. All right, let me reset. There we go. Okay. So we should still see, I'll go ahead and remove this just for the sake of doing things right. Okay, so I'm going to walk my player over to a Mineable. Okay, so we still use that on trigger enter because he's got this child object that is a trigger, so it causes the trigger to fire on this miner here. Okay, and we can still mine. So if you have a problem with removing your player from the player layer, you can create a child object with a trigger on it. And that must be IgnoreRaycast if you want the ray to go past your guy. All right. Uh-oh. Let's take a look at what happened there. What am I hitting here? Okay, now there we go. Okay, it wasn't working for a second, but now we're good. Okay, so just remember, if you're having any trouble, all right, debug it. That's what I did with my print function there, and then make sure that if you're firing a ray at something and maybe it's hitting your player or whatever, maybe you forgot about a trigger or an invisible collider, put that on IgnoreRaycast, and then the ray will go right through it. Alright, so that's pretty much the end of the video. Let's go ahead and go back into our miner and just make sure that we take off those effects, that secondary effect of printing the name. We'll go ahead and rip that out of the cursor over mine function. Let's go into play mode and make sure that everything is working. We'll pick up some items. Okay, now remember, if you don't have an inventory, I have a tutorial available on how to make one and how to create crafting. Uh-oh. Now we might actually be interfering. Now it's a good thing we did this. Okay. So okay, I had left I changed it in play mode and I left it there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and ignore raycast on my player. Alright, don't forget that. If you're having troubles, make sure you're on the right layers. Okay, now if you don't have an inventory, I've got a tutorial on how to make an inventory, on how to make the UI for it, and how to do crafting. Alright, so you'll see me pick up some stuff here. I think once we get a certain amount of wood, we can build doors and stuff like that. Let me see if we've got the requirements. Wood and paper clips. Anyway, if you guys have any suggestions or comments, please let me know. Like the video, subscribe to the channel for more similar content. I'm also doing stuff, just playing video games, doing a little bit of devlog. I'm not really working on any game in particular. That's why I've had the time to do these tutorials. Hopefully I'll come up with something more original than this, but at the moment, it just hasn't been the case. So you guys get to choose the content, and that, just leave a comment. All right, thanks a lot. I really hope this series has helped you out. I'll put it into a playlist, and that's it.